Hello, and welcome to the Fearless Authenticity Podcast. I am Jeanne Sparrow, and this is my pod about how we find success in who we truly are. These are conversations I love to have with people who know what that looks and feels like, in the hopes that it inspires you to dream bigger, to serve the world as you were created to do so, and to live the life you want to live. Now, I always say, I hope this gets deep because that's where we find the good stuff, but don't get it twisted. This is about the fun in life, because if it ain't fun, it ain't worth doing. So let's dare to be brave, be free, be you together. Now, today's guest was a staple here in Chicago on television news as a reporter and as an anchor for 25 years, covering everything from the historic inauguration of President Barack Obama to the carnival sideshow of a trial of convicted murderer Drew Peterson. She is active in supporting and volunteering for charitable causes, and she has become known for speaking out frankly on issues that are a shared but often secret experience for many women in television, most notably when she made headlines for disclosing her diagnosis of PTSD, brought on by covering the very stories that you watch on the news each and every day. She is now a successful entrepreneur with her own PR and media firm, helping businesses tell their stories and build their customer base. She's an adoring mom, a devoted Cubs fan, and a passionate storyteller. I am honored to welcome Marcella Raymond to the Fearless Authenticity Podcast. Marcella!
Oh, hi, that was so nice. That was
so true.
Nice. That was really beautiful. Thank you. I just always love how you portray things. It's so inspiring.
Oh, aren't you sweet. You know what? I worked with a lot of comedians, and I've said this before. Comedians know how to bring somebody on a stage.
Yeah.
And I learned that from them. And I feel like everybody who gives me a little bit of their time deserves to be given their flowers in this moment. Because we wait till people are dead sometimes to
You know
speak good
what?
things
Seriously.
about them.
Yep. I saw a movie the other night. Not Love at First Sight. I can't remember what exactly it was, but at the end, one of the main character's mother was dying, and she knew that she was going to die soon, and she had a living funeral.
Oh,
and I was like,
I saw this movie. They
met on the plane.
I cried. Oh my God, that was the best movie. It was on Netflix, and I watched it when I was on vacation. And I was thinking the same thing, Marcella. You know what? I'm going to look up the thing, and in post, we're going to put the name of the movie on. But it was a beautiful little love story, but baked in it was this gorgeous moment of that. I mean, it was odd, but then I was like, wait a minute, hold up. She's onto something.
Yeah.
And
I mean, don't you want to know what everyone thinks about you? And they don't usually tell you. Well, sometimes they do, of course, but they, maybe more of an acquaintance doesn't say anything to you about maybe how you've changed their life or, what you meant to them or something like that. So I thought, you know what? And at that point in time in your life, you need some love.
Yes, absolutely. Because the woman, because she's dying of cancer, and she's like, and they're this great artistic, crazy family. And I just thought it was the most beautiful thing. And, that actually brings up one of the first things that I think people might know about you. And the thing is, and I want to start with how we did before we started the podcast, was one of the things I love about you, beside the fact that you were an amazing reporter and storyteller, but your transparency and your honesty about the things that we, especially as women, but I think everybody in any kind of public sphere, but especially as women in media, face and never talk about.
Right.
And because the thing is that sometimes we do get people telling us things and what they think of us. And it's never the pretty stuff. It's the things, it's the judgments. Some of it I think are projections at this point. But when you speak out about things like your PTSD, about that one letter, I'm sure of many odd communications you've gotten over the years.
The fat shaming one?
The fat shaming one. And which was so dumb, because it was like, I'm like, wait a minute, she's still like, she's not big. Like, what? She might have gained some weight. right? But she not, even if she was a big girl, like, so
Oh,
anyway.
it ticked me off like I cannot tell you. And that's why I had to post it. I was like, who is this person hiding behind a computer somewhere and thinks that they can just bash me or tell me, be negative and nasty? And I
And
was
they're
like,
always anonymous. And
they
and and
aren't
I should
they?
say for people, because this happened almost 10 years ago, where you got this anonymous
Hmm.
typewritten letter
Yeah.
from somebody who claimed to be in advertising and should not be. That's the reason for their
Hmm. Hmm.
anonymity.
And
Um,
they said they were, a loyal viewer,
and
like a
concerned
fan. Yeah,
and
right.
concerned. And, so from that horrid expression of how, and it was nothing about your work, it was all about how
Right.
they thought you looked and your
Hmm.
age, because it was some ageism baked in that.
Hmm.
It wasn't just
Yeah.
about size.
Right.
And then later you talking so frankly about how covering all, and I remember every single one of those stories
Oh my
that you
God.
talked about
Mm.
that contributed to your PTSD,
Hmm.
crying, going to scenes, to crime scenes to cover them.
Hmm.
My heart went out to you when you
Oh,
talked
thank
about
you.
it. And
Hmm.
can I tell you something? I was also grateful because at that point I was already out of TV news,
Right. Right.
and I had started my business and things like that. But in that moment, I remembered, and I wasn't even a GA, I wasn't a general assignment
Hmm.
reporter. But when you sit at a desk and have to just talk about these things,
Right.
much less look at them,
Right.
after a while, you get frayed. What
Hmm.
made you decide to lean into that openness and honesty about what you were going through, that people usually just expect you to suck it up because that's your job?
I do not suck things up very well, Jeanne. I I have to talk about it, and I have to, I want people who are going through the same thing to understand that I am not any different from you. So, and we do get mislabeled, and we do get, oh, you get your makeup done and you get your, I'm like, you have no idea what my job is like. And, they're just seeing it on TV and they're like, oh, that's such a sad story, but never thinking about how it affects the reporter
Right.
and the photographer and the editor and the writer and the anchor. So it's everybody, but especially when you're out on the scene, um, it was compounded PSD. I mean, you cannot, I don't think, at least I could not just push it down any longer. It came out in every aspect of my life. So there was no other way to do it than to talk about it.
And I applaud you for it, because I think what it also did is gave other people permission to talk about it,
Hmm.
even if they were only talking about it in their closest circles.
Right.
And I think that's how I think of fearless authenticity, right? This idea that who we are and how we choose to share
Hmm.
gives other people permission to do the same thing, because
Right.
so often there are pressures. And in our business, there are pressures to look a certain way, to talk a
Hmm.
certain way, to tell stories a certain way. But here's the thing that I think, I don't know, that I saw in it when you talked about it back then, and even more so now, in retrospect, especially having gone through the pandemic, and now,
Hmm. Oh
with
yeah.
the Israel-Hamas war, and how
Hmm. Hmm.
people's feelings are really at the surface, is that it is that very quality that helped you be the reporter that you were. And not encouraging that actually was not encouraging the thing that is the strength
Right.
that made you valuable in a newsroom. And I think all of that stuff starts right there in a workplace. So whether
Hmm.
you work in a newsroom, or in a on a trading floor, or in any of these things, what the thing that makes you you was the thing that actually made you do your job. But then you were being asked, if not so subtly, not to be that person.
Right. Well, I don't, what was I going to say? I lost my train of thought. I, I mean, there were stories. The one that I mean, I can remember one from back when I was working in Rockford, and I was too involved with families of victims. I was way too involved. And eventually all of that, you can't, or at least I couldn't keep my cool anymore. So, it started in Rockford, and I remember crying, and there was a trial, and this man who was a quadriplegic was murdered by his friends. And I remember saying to one of my best friends who was there, I was like, I was just sobbing. She's like, oh, suck it up. She called me Marcy. Suck it up, Marcy. It'll be okay. Just keep going. So there were many of those that I think what I did was, I would go out, do the story on deadline. It was over. I'd come home. And then when I came home, I was probably drinking too much. I was angry. I was snippy. I was emotional. All these kinds of things that I never really correlated. I did kind of correlate it to my job, but nothing specific. So, I remember all along my 35 years, all these stories that I just couldn't do it anymore. And I remember the one that just broke me was AJ Friend, the boy in Crystal Lake.
That story broke a lot of us.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what, before you talk about that, I want to also point out that what you described about the behavior, that's most of our behavior in a newsroom.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? We do it to
Isn't
each
it?
other in the sense of, oh, we're on deadline. We got to get this quick.
Oh, yeah.
And the things we say and whatever. And then later we come back and apologize, with some people.
Right.
But
the F-bombs are going.
Right. It's like the frustration, the screaming, the moment, whatever.
Right.
All those things pop off in newsrooms, and everybody just thinks it's personality and it's perfection and things like that. But you were talking about AJ and how that story was.
Yeah, it was so interesting because I know so many people in law enforcement and, people that I could call for things. And I wasn't even working that morning, and it happened. And I remember just getting on the story, like it's almost so weird because it's like, this is your job, but you love getting that story. Right. Like you want to get the story. You want to get the information. You want to get it out as fast as you can. It's really important to you to tell the story correctly and accurately. And so I was just involved in that, even when I wasn't working. And then I had some DCFS transcripts of the interactions that DCFS had with the family. And, that was killing me, but I kept doing it. And then, all of a sudden they found his body, and I was just, oh my God, I could barely speak on the air. And that's when I knew, because it had been accumulation, like the Mercy Hospital shooting.
Oh yeah.
That, Jeanne, messed me up so badly. That was, if people don't remember, it was a doctor at Mercy Hospital, and her ex-fiance came with a gun and killed her, and an officer, and I think it was a pharmaceutical assistant, and then he died. And I went to go talk to the family, and you're always on deadline. It's like you're always doing it. And I remember sitting there with them, and they were the most lovely people I have ever met. And I thought, this can't be happening. It's crazy. And so my goal all the time was to write a story that the family would appreciate, that would tell the story of their loved one and not make it just another headline, like just another victim, just another murder, just another whatever. It was like, it was really, really important to me to do that. And I think that's why I eventually, couldn't do it anymore, because I was on the air. Like, so you're rushing and you're getting all the stuff, and you run out and you run to your truck, and, you got to be on the air in 45 minutes or whatever. And you have to write something together and put it together and all that kind of stuff. And then I go on the air, and as I'm listening to the story I wrote, I just, at the end, I had to take a breath, and I almost cried on the air. And I said, I'm sorry. This is just a story that has really affected me. And reporters do not do that. Then I got off the air. I sobbed, Jeanne, for I can't even tell you how long. We were in Indiana. The family lived in Indiana and had to drive all the way back to the city. And it was just like hyperventilating, crying.
What, if anything, did your news director say about that?
My news director at the time was amazing.
Right.
She is amazing. And she was concerned about me. I mean, everybody was. And I felt completely supported. I mean, after AJ, I didn't cover, and I was diagnosed, I didn't cover crime anymore. I didn't cover any of those really horrible stories. So they were very good. But you know what? I like, it was hard to go to work. It was just, you know, you have
The environment.
And the anxiety. And I'd be like driving in and I'm thinking, what am I going to be doing today? What am I, you know? And I felt like I couldn't do my job anymore because it was just, everything was affecting me. You know, it had just, and because I wasn't covering it anymore, didn't mean anything. You know, like there was another horrific, some guy came into a check cashing place and killed a woman with her 2 kids. And, you know, you're looking at that video, there is blood everywhere. Like, how does that not affect you? And even though I was not there, I had to look at the video. So I said to Mom Bradley's name wrong. And they were like, are you okay? What's wrong with you? And I'm like, I just, you know, I honestly, I will tell you right now, I had an opportunity to talk to the 2 boys and I refused. I said, nope, I am not doing that. I don't care. I don't care. These kids need to heal. And it was just, and at that point I was like, you know what? This is just way too hard for me. Yeah.
And you know, what I find interesting about this is the things that again, that make us good storytellers are the things that also make us vulnerable. And now you've shifted into a different kind of storytelling. But what I wonder is when did you know that TV news or storytelling was the thing for you? When did you know? Was there like a turning point or a moment when the light came on and you're like, this is for me?
Yeah.
No matter what happened at this point and how you came to end it, or at least this version of it, what was it that made you know that you were capable of doing that and that it was what you were meant to do? Because clearly your passion for it lasted over 3 decades.
Yeah.
And it's also rare. Let's also be really clear how rare it is to work at one station for over 20 years, doing what you did in a major market, period. What made you know that that was the thing for you?
You know, I always loved the Sunday paper. That was like the thing in my house. And I would get the Sunday paper and I would lay on the floor and I would read it in high school, front to back. Never missed a Royko column, never missed, you know, all those kinds of, you know, really powerful writers and journalists. And then I have a cousin who worked for NBC Sports and he came into town. And he was talking about it and I was like, oh, this sounds so cool. You know, and in your teenage mind, you're like, ooh, fun. Yay, let's go do it. And then I worked my butt off to get to Chicago and it was probably 10 years. And then it was just murder after murder after murder after murder after murder after murder. And it, you know, the same thing. I mean, I was actually first diagnosed in 2009 and I took almost 3 months off and then came back because it was the recession and nobody was hiring and I had to support my son. So I went back, So it just it kept going. It kept going. And I always knew, but I was like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? Like, what else am I good at? You know what I mean? Just those little things and those little doubts that you have. And I think it just came to the head where I was like, it doesn't matter what I do. I can't do this anymore.
Wow. So,
Yeah.
so then what was the conversation like for you of what can I do? Because clearly you've landed on something you're doing and helping business, and you're doing the same thing, just in a different way. How did you get to that point? Because I always find that gap interesting. As somebody who has also transitioned out of TV news and talk show and that sort of thing, that the gaps that happen in the transition to a second career are interesting, and repurposing what you know. How did you get to that essence of who you are to be able to apply it to something else?
Well, I loved covering stories that were meaningful and fun, and I really had a good time with them. So that's where my focus shifted, because after COVID, which was horrific for journalists, I was like, okay, I need my plan B's got to be right now, because this is not going to work anymore. So that's when I was like, okay, let me start to build this PR business, because I know I would get press releases 10 or 20 a day, the same thing. And it's like, I know how to write a press release. I know how to write a press release that gets the attention of a producer, a reporter, an anchor. So I was like, okay, well, this seems like a natural fit. So for 2 years, I worked 7 days a week. I just did the weekend breaks on the morning show on the weekends, and it's just a feature all morning. And then during the week, I worked on my PR media company. So because I needed a steady paycheck, I needed to keep my insurance, all those things that when you're a small business owner, you don't get, which is absolutely a travesty. So I did that and kept going. And then eventually I was like, okay, I think I can do this. And we decided on a date. It was June 23rd, just this past summer. And it was scary.
Yeah.
It was scary. And it's still scary, Jeanne, because it's still, where's my next client going to come from? Am I going to be, and this is just, people always think, oh, reporters, and you make so much money. You don't, that you don't. So, it's like,
swear to God, we rich.
They think we're rich. So like someone said to me the other day, well, I drive a Hyundai Santa Fe that's a 2012 and is about to die. And he's like, oh, I thought maybe you drove a Maserati or something. I was like, what?
You're like, bro, we working.
Really?
We working. We are union employees for a reason. Okay?
Exactly.
Ma'am.
And I just thought that was hilarious. So yeah, I mean, I just worked my butt off, and I still do. And so now, you have the challenges of like, someone doesn't pay you, and, it's difficult to navigate that. And then, you have so many clients, and then one drops off. And then, so you're always trying to, and anytime you have your own business, you're always trying to get ahead. So, it's been really not even a year for me full time. So my dad keeps saying, maybe you should get a full-time job. I'm like, I do not want to work for a corporation ever again. Never. So, I'm gonna see how it goes. But I'm also very optimistic.
And here's the thing, and this is a question I often ask my entrepreneurs, and I'm glad that I'm getting you early in the journey. The fact that you have been doing it, though, I mean, I just want to say this because I remember what it felt like to be where you are at that point. Because I'm going on, let's see, 7 years in business for myself. And I'm gonna tell you something, my business has changed every year that completely. I've had it. Yep. The pandemic was part of it, but it's also learning from your customers and things like that. But the thing I want to ask you this right now, because I think this was an important discovery for me. of all the challenges that you've had as you've been building your business, one of my kind of business coaches said to me, you got to learn how to fail forward, to learn from these challenges, these setbacks,
Right.
because they can give you momentum as you figure things out. What have you learned thus far for facing those disappointments or those setbacks that help you to bounce back and keep moving forward? Because it sounds like you've had them already.
And I still do.
And you will continue to. Here's the thing.
Right.
You just understand and have the capacity, I think, to handle them.
Right.
I also think that there is something very particular about our industry that prepares us very well for this, that I didn't realize till I was in it. But I want to get your perspective on that. Do you have a system for bouncing back now?
You know what? It really comes from my childhood. I mean, my mother always said, it's going to work out. It'll be fine. And when I look back on my life, every time I struggled, it was okay. And it was fine. So I look at certain times in my life, I'm like, that was just a blip. I came out on the other side, even better. So let's just keep moving along. And I try to tell my son that now. He's 22. And I'm like, there's, not that it doesn't matter. I completely understand the things he's going through. But when he starts stressing about the future and stressing about things like that, I'm like, you know what? It's going to be fine. It is. It's just going to be fine. So that's how I've always operated. I think I had that really dark time in news that it was more difficult, but I've always looked back and said, when my car broke down, all right, I got another car, or, like small things like that. But those are the things that you have to think about when you're doing big stuff, like, starting a business. So I get down. I feel some days I'm like, I've got, imposter syndrome. I'm like, what am I doing? Like, what?
As accomplished as you are, this is imposter syndrome is the wildest thing to me. Even when I've had it myself, where I go, why are you even here, girl? But it is wild to me, because then when you look at the facts, you're like, of course I belong here.
Right.
Where does that come from for you, and how do you move through it? Or how are you moving through it?
I mean, I don't, if you can be confident every single day, then God bless, but I think the majority of people are not. So what I do is I'm like, okay, so this was going on. This client didn't pay me. What are my options? Okay. I could take them to court, but it's not really worth it because it's not that much money, and then I start thinking, well, how dare could a small business do something like that to another small business? And, all this stuff runs in your head. And then I think, you know what? I am not wasting my time on this. I'm not. It's like where I used to take maybe split second decisions and, maybe action when I really should have thought about it before. I'm like, you know what? Okay, they didn't. Let's move on. Because if you harbor all that stuff, it can cripple you. And I don't have time to be crippled.
Amen to that, sister. Amen to that. Because as in the wise words of somebody online, ain't nobody got time for that.
Right. I do not. And that's what I try to teach my son. Like, you're going to go through hurdles. You're going to go through things in life, and you will always be fine.
I love that. Is that the best piece of advice you've ever gotten?
Yeah. I think so. And work hard, but don't let it consume you, which I did for a really long time. I mean, I finally have weekends off. So I'm like, you know what? Sure, I have some work to do. Maybe I'll do a couple hours Saturday, a couple hours Sunday, but I'm going to enjoy my weekend because I need that in order to go through the next week. So, it's like all these people say when you start your business, you're working 50, 60 hours a week, you're doing this, you're doing that. I'm like, there is no way that I can physically do that. Mentally, emotionally, none of it. So I just try to, take care of myself so that once Monday comes, I'm not completely exhausted and I'm rejuvenated. I'm like, okay, this is what I have to do. So
I love that you brought up self-care.
yeah, it is. It's a necessity. It is a necessity, no matter what it is. If you just go out for a walk, you go to the forest preserve, you walk along the lake, you do something that rejuvenates you. It doesn't have to be anything costly or, every single day. It's just something that makes you feel good.
I love that.
Yeah.
So I want to wind down with my last two questions that I always ask everybody. What has been your proudest achievement so far? And this is a two-parter. What's been your proudest achievement so far? And what do you still dream of doing?
I think anybody who's a parent would say my child. But, I think that is true because he is such an amazing young man. He's 22 and we have a tremendously close relationship. And people say to me, how do you have that? Like, what did you do to foster that? And I said, I wanted him to always know he could trust me regardless. He wasn't going to be, sent to boarding school. He wasn't going to any of that kind of stuff. And I was like, you can always trust me. And then, we would just talk about it. So, they're like, well, you should pat yourself on the back. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to pat myself on the back. Just give me that right there. And then, my dreams moving forward are, I want to have a successful business. I want to be able to travel. I don't want to watch every penny. I want to be established, and that takes time. And it's always going to, but I can see the growth already. So from when I started, it's really pretty damn good. So that's why that's my next goal. That's my next thing is just to, I don't know, conquer the world, girl.
I love it. And my very final question that I ask everyone, Marcella, when do you feel like you are, excuse me, at your best, truest, most authentic expression of yourself?
With my son. I mean, it is, he is everything in the world to me. And it is, we've gone through a lot together. We've overcome hurdles. We've done all this kind of stuff. And I think he is the one who I am my most real around, which is, I'm very, very, very lucky to have that. Like, he's coming home for Thanksgiving. He's in the Army. He's a lieutenant.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm. And so he's coming back from training Thursday morning. And Friday, I'm like, you want to get your Chicago fix, right? Because he loves the city. He went to DePaul. And he's like, yeah, but if it's going to stress you out or, don't worry about it. And I said, you know what? All I want to do is spend time with you. It doesn't matter to me if we're an hour in the car. It doesn't make any difference to me what we're doing because you are my greatest joy and you give me the strength, to keep going. And
he's your legacy.
Yeah.
He is your legacy.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we forget that the young people in our lives, whether they're our children or things like that, when we pour into them, that's how they become themselves.
Yeah.
And how we see what we've done in real life. And I love that for him. I love that for you. Please thank him for his service to our country.
I will. Thank you. Yeah.
I love that. Thank you so much, Marcella.
Thanks, Jeanne. It was just such a pleasure talking to you. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Thank you, Marcella. It was great having that conversation. It's always nice to revisit a part of my life and know that I wasn't alone during that time with what I was experiencing too. So here are some of my highlights from my conversation with Marcella. Anytime you have your own business, you are always trying to get ahead, and it always feels like you're trying to get ahead. But I also love how she emphasized that finding a plan B is possible by asking yourself and examining, what do you know how to do? And sometimes when you ask that, you don't even know that there's an answer other than what you're doing now, but the answer can reveal itself to you. You just got to ask it. I also love that how one of her expressions of her authenticity, both in her work and her life, is talking about the difficulties. That's what she did when she talked about, the different criticisms she's gotten and talked about it publicly. Because a lot of times, and I think this happens no matter what we do, we end up kind of swallowing the hard things, thinking it's just us or thinking that it's not right to talk about, but we shy away from talking about the very things that could liberate us. And we also saw in her PTSD diagnosis and the willingness to finally talk about it, that sometimes the things we think we can't say are the very things that could damage us or do us in. And then finally, I'm going to use this quote and keep it close to my heart because I sure could have used it earlier in life. Work hard, but do not let it consume you, because it will eat you up. Thank you so much, Marcella, for your honesty, for speaking out, and for advocating for others by doing that, especially at a time in our industry when nobody was talking about the things that you were, especially not publicly, but not really in a private sense either. So thank you so much, Marcella. Also, check out all of her work at marcellaraymondmedia.com. I appreciate you, my Fearless Authenticity listeners. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast each and every week that we have new episodes. I would not do this without you, and I couldn't do it without my team, my amazing production team, Lisa E., Vicky Wayne, Jess, everybody. Thanks for your hard work every week. Also want to say a big thank you to Jerry Johnson for my theme music. Please rate, review, download, subscribe, and share this episode everywhere you get your podcasts, including on YouTube, where the video version lives. It does really help us to keep growing and doing the things we want to do and having the impact we want to have in the community. I would also be honored if you would join my community by signing up for my newsletter at fearlessauthenticity.com, as well as following me on social media. At JM Sparrow is where you find me on Instagram and Twitter. At Ms. Jeanne Sparrow is where you find me on YouTube, Facebook, and TikTok. Until next time, have a great one. And this has been Fearless Authenticity with Jeanne Sparrow. See you soon.